He finally texts you back. Here's exactly what to say. Oh, waited. You gave space. You focused on your own life. And then it happened. He finally texts you back. Now what? Your heart's racing. Your mind's already flipping through 10 different replies. But this moment isn't just about texting back. It's about standing in your power. First, don't reward inconsistency. Just because someone reappears doesn't mean they deserve your emotional energy on demand. A text isn't a trophy, it's just a message. You're not here to play games, but you're also not here to be someone's second thought. Second, keep your cool. You don't need to pretend to be cold, but you also don't need to act like he just walked on water. Match his energy, not his timing. Let your reply be calm, collected, confident. That's what sets you apart. Third, ask yourself, what does this message mean? Is he checking in out of boredom? Is he feeling guilty? Or is he genuinely interested again? Don't project what you hope it means. Read what it actually says. If his message lacks effort, don't overcompensate with yours. Fourth, take the conversation somewhere. Don't fall back into the endless "how are you" loops. If you're replying, bring direction. Be playful, be real, be light, but make sure you're building connection, not just killing time. Fifth, remember your value. The most attractive response is one rooted in self-respect. You don't need to chase. If he wants a place in your life, he'll earn it, not through a single text, but through consistent, meaningful action. You are not defined by who texts you. You are defined by what you accept. So, when you see that message pop up on your screen, smile, breathe, and respond like someone who knows they are worth more than breadcrumbs. When someone finally texts you back after a noticeable period of silence or distance, the natural impulse is often to react quickly, sometimes with excitement, sometimes with anxiety. But before anything else, it's important to ground yourself in one essential truth. Not all attention is valuable, and not all communication deserves a reward. This is where the idea of not rewarding inconsistency becomes so important. When someone goes quiet and then resurfaces at their own convenience, it's easy to fall into the trap of seeing their reappearance as validation. You might start telling yourself stories. Maybe they were just busy. Maybe they were scared of their feelings. Maybe they were unsure, but now they're ready. But the fact remains that when someone disappears without explanation and returns without accountability, it often signals a pattern of behavior rather than a momentary lapse. Rewarding that inconsistency sends a message, not just to them, but to yourself, that their behavior is acceptable. It tells them that they can come and go as they please and still be received with open arms and instant enthusiasm. That's not a standard, that's a loophole. People treat us based on the standards we set, and when those standards are too flexible, especially in the early stages of dating or rebuilding connection, we become vulnerable to cycles of hot and cold that leave us confused, depleted, and undervalued. This doesn't mean you have to be rude, dismissive, or cold. What it means is that your energy should match the level of investment being shown. If someone took days, weeks, or even months to re-engage, your response shouldn't be overflowing with warmth and eagerness. It should be measured. Curious, perhaps, but not overly giving. Not rewarding inconsistency also involves emotional discipline. It's easy to mistake a return text for a genuine interest, but consistency is the true measure of intention. A person's decision to reach out once says far less than what they do in the days that follow. If someone really wants to re-enter your life meaningfully, they'll do so with action, not just a message. And if they're only offering breadcrumbs, a hey, a late night text, or a random check-in, that's not enough to warrant your full attention. Ultimately, not rewarding inconsistency is about recognizing your worth and protecting your peace. It's about choosing to engage from a place of self-respect rather than emotional scarcity. When you wait for someone to be consistent, before you invest emotionally, you're showing them and yourself that you value real connection over fleeting attention. You're not punishing them. You're just no longer handing out rewards for minimum effort. That's not being hard to get. That's having a high standard, and it's the foundation for any healthy relationship. When someone finally texts you after being distant or absent, one of the most crucial things you can do is keep your emotional balance. It's easy to let your emotions run the show, especially if this is someone you've missed, someone you've thought about, or someone who has left you in a state of confusion. But the power lies in your ability to remain composed, centered, and unaffected by the emotional charge of the moment. It's natural to feel a rush of excitement when that long-awaited message appears, but reacting impulsively can often lead to over-investment or regret. The goal is not to ignore your emotions, but to regulate them in a way that allows you to respond with clarity and strength. Keeping your cool doesn't mean playing mind games or trying to appear aloof. It simply means you don't hand over your emotional power the moment someone reaches out. You don't need to pretend not to care, but you also don't need to show all your cards. The balance lies in responding with warmth without overextending yourself. When your reply comes from a grounded place, it sends a powerful message. You're not desperate for attention. You're not emotionally dependent on this person's communication, and you're fully in control of your actions. When people feel emotionally unstable or unsure, they often swing between extremes, either ignoring the message entirely out of self-protection or replying with too much eagerness, overcompensating for the emotional distance that was previously created. But composure lives in the middle ground. It's responding when you're ready, not just when you're triggered. It's not replying within seconds just to prove your interest. It's taking the time you need to decide how you feel about the message and what kind of response aligns with your values. By staying calm, you also allow yourself the chance to assess the tone and content of the message itself. You don't get swept up in the act of receiving a text. Instead, you take a moment to ask yourself, what does this person really saying? What does their effort communicate? You let your head and heart work together rather than letting emotion run unchecked. Calm communication also sets a different tone for the interaction. If the person is trying to re-establish a connection, your grounded energy makes it clear that your life has continued, that you're still thriving, and that you don't see them as the missing piece to your happiness. That kind of energy is magnetic. People are drawn to those who are emotionally stable and self-assured. Keeping your cool doesn't just help you protect your heart. It also increases your influence in the interaction. You lead the emotional pace rather than being led. And when someone sees that you can remain emotionally composed, it raises their level of respect for you. It shows them you're not easily swayed, and that if they want to be part of your life, they'll need to show up consistently, not just with a single message, but with steady, meaningful act. When someone reaches out after a long period of silence, it's tempting to immediately interpret the message in the most flattering light. You might start filling in the blanks, thinking maybe they missed you, maybe they've been thinking about you this whole time, or maybe they finally realized your value. This is especially common when we've been emotionally invested in someone, but it's crucial to pause and ask the deeper question, what does this message actually mean? Not what you want it to mean. What does it really say? Human beings are meaning-making machines. When we care about someone, we tend to create narratives around their behavior that justify our continued investment. A simple "hey" can be overanalyzed for hours, dissecting tone, punctuation, and timing, hoping to extract some deeper emotional significance. But the reality is, sometimes a message, if the content is vague, lazy, or lacking in substance, it's likely not a sign of deep reflection or meaningful change. It may just be a moment of boredom, curiosity, or habit on their part. This is why emotional discernment is so important. You need to separate your desire for connection from the reality of what's being offered. If the message doesn't express genuine interest, accountability, or any clear intention, don't assume it's a signal of meaningful reconnection. Look at the effort. Look at the timing. Look at the consistency of their past behavior. If this person has a history of going quiet and resurfacing when it's convenient, chances are this is more of the same, not a turning point. When you ask yourself what the message means, consider what is missing as much as what is being said. Did they apologize for the silence? Did they express any desire to see you or speak more deeply? Or did they send a dry, disconnected text with no real emotional weight? This evaluation isn't about being cynical, it's about being honest. When we stop projecting our hopes onto empty gestures, we become far better at protecting our emotional well-being. This key point also speaks to the power of not rushing to respond. When you take a step back to truly analyze the meaning behind a message, you give yourself the space to act wisely rather than impulsively. Maybe their message is genuine, maybe it's not, but you don't need to assume either way. Instead, you wait to see whether their words are followed by action, because that's where true intention reveals itself. Being able to evaluate a message for what it is, without attaching it to fantasy or longing, puts you back in control. You're not just reacting from emotion, you're responding from clarity. And from that space, you can decide whether this person's message aligns with what you want, need, and deserve. Because no matter how much you've missed someone, no matter how long you've waited, your heart deserves more than a half effort. It deserves consistency, intention, and presence. And if the message doesn't reflect that, it's perfectly okay to keep your energy guarded and your standards high. When someone who has been distant suddenly messages you, it's easy to fall into passive conversation loops, the kind where both of you exchange generic questions like, "How are you?" and "What's up?" without any real depth. These surface-level exchanges can feel safe, especially if you're unsure about their intentions, but they rarely create meaningful connection or momentum. If you're going to respond at all, one of the most impactful things you can do is take the conversation somewhere. That doesn't mean forcing intensity or trying to control the direction aggressively. It means being intentional about how you engage, so that you're not just exchanging words, but actually exploring compatibility, chemistry, and clarity. Taking the conversation somewhere is about substance over noise. If the message you receive is vague, like a simple "hey," or "what's going on," you can choose to elevate the conversation. Instead of matching vague with vague, bring in a spark of curiosity, wit, or insight. Respond in a way that communicates your personality, your confidence, and your standards for what kind of communication you're willing to invest in. A person who is truly interested will rise to the level of your communication. A person who isn't, won't. That response tells you everything you need to know. This isn't about being demanding or difficult. It's about valuing your time and emotional energy. When you keep the conversation light but meaningful, you stay in your power. You might ask an interesting question, share something funny or thought-provoking, or introduce a topic that matters to you. These kinds of responses do two things. They set the tone for how you want to be engaged with, and they give the other person an opportunity to actually show who they are and how they connect. You're not just making small talk. You're inviting connection on a deeper level. They'll build on your energy. People who are only checking in out of boredom or habit will reveal their lack of effort quickly when faced with more intentional communication. You won't have to guess. Their responses will show you exactly where they stand. Taking the conversation somewhere also means not slipping back into old patterns, especially if the previous dynamic was vague, inconsistent, or emotionally unfulfilling. If you've done work to grow, to create boundaries, and to protect your peace, then every interaction is a chance to reinforce that growth. You no longer accept bare minimum engagement because you've outgrown that version of yourself who would wait around for attention. By guiding the conversation with intention and depth, you're demonstrating emotional maturity and making it clear that if someone wants access to your time and heart, they'll have to bring more than a half-hearted, hey. They'll have to bring presence, effort, and real communication. Knowing your value is the most powerful position you can hold when someone who previously distanced themselves decides to reach out. It's not about ego or pride, it's about clarity. When you understand your worth, you stop interpreting breadcrumbs as a feast. You no longer feel the need to chase validation from someone who has already shown you inconsistency. Your sense of self becomes rooted not in how someone treats you in a fleeting moment, but in how consistently you treat yourself with respect, boundaries, and love. When that long-awaited message arrives, it's easy to feel a rush of relief. The silence is broken, the story resumes, and for a brief moment, the emotional uncertainty disappears. But this is exactly when you need to remind yourself your value was never diminished just because someone took time to come back around. The act of receiving a text should never make you feel more valuable because your value never left. That message didn't add anything to your worth, and your response doesn't need to prove anything. Knowing your value changes your whole approach. It means you don't rush to respond to prove your interest or availability. You take your time, not to play games, but because you honor your energy. You read between the lines and decide if their message aligns with the standard you've set for the kind of relationship you want. If it doesn't, if it feels half-hearted, unclear, or like an afterthought, you don't feel compelled to keep the door wide open. You reserve your space for those who show up with consistency, honesty, and genuine interest. People often respond emotionally to messages because they believe something is at stake, like they need to win this person back or say the perfect thing to keep them engaged. But when you truly know your worth, you stop trying to earn someone's effort. Instead, you allow space for people to earn yours. That shift is subtle but powerful. It means that the conversation isn't about proving you're worthy. It's about observing if the other person's actions align with what you deserve. When you operate from this mindset, your tone naturally shifts. You come across as calm, grounded, and unshakable, not because you're cold or indifferent, but because you're no longer reacting from a place of insecurity. You've accepted that not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay, and you've made peace with the fact that attention without intention is not enough. You don't get attached to the idea of what this could be unless their actions match your standards consistently. You respond not because you're eager, but because you're open. Open to something meaningful, but unwilling to settle for anything less. That's the essence of high self-worth, not needing to prove it, not needing to explain it, just living it. And when you respond from that place, anyone on the other side of the screen will feel it. They'll know you're not just another option, you're a standard, one that doesn't load just because someone finally decided to text. Thank you so much for listening. If this message helped bring you clarity, calm, or a little extra confidence, then I'm truly grateful. You deserve communication that's consistent, respect that's unwavering, and love that feels secure, not uncertain. Keep holding your standard. Keep protecting your peace. And remember, the way you love yourself sets the tone for how others will love you. Until next time, stay strong, stay grounded, And most of all, stay true to you. Take care and thank you again.